Okay, I'm recording GRE Speed Work, Part 2, Verbal Reasoning, and I'm going to talk specifically about how to speed up your vocabulary. I think Magoosh does a great job of doing GRE individual questions, but what I see as a real mistake in a lot of videos that are steering you wrong is with vocabulary, and I'm a vocabulary expert, not just in English, but especially with pharmacology. I have 600-700 videos on pronunciation. Trust me when I say I can improve your vocabulary, not only in English, but if you want to look at my other videos, if you're going to be a physician, some kind of health professional, if you're coming from another country and want to know how to pronounce generic medication names that are used by Americans, then those would be good for you as well. So introduction, my background. English isn't my first language, although it may sound like it. I learned Spanish first. My father's Peruvian. And my mom's from Washington, D.C., and she loves language and Latin. And I know that sometimes somebody that might have an accent or somebody that is struggling to learn the language may have some barriers, and that's a real important thing for me, and that's why I make these videos. My credentials, so who am I to tell you to listen to me about the GRE? I scored 5 on the analytical writing, and looking back, I know that I could have scored 5.5 if I had changed the little words to big words, but I do copy editing, I write textbooks, academic textbooks, so I'm so used to writing clear, concise prose that I didn't think to go back and make the big words because the computer will judge the vocabulary in the analytical writing, and I could have used them properly, but 5 is still respectable. 163 on the quantitative. A PhD program that I ended up in was human-computer interaction and English. It's a combination. And that quantitative part, it's respectable, but if you're going to be engineer, you know that you need to be in the 90th percentile. But I think it's still respectable for somebody that has a language background. And then 168 on the verbal reasoning. So perfect is 170, and that puts me in the 98th percentile. And you would think that that's really high, but I'm going to show you that that's not necessarily true. So first of all, what is speed work? I've got a lot of criticism in the comments that I was misleading people, that I was, this was supposed to be a math problem or something like that. Well, it's a free video. I'm not trying to mislead anyone. I'm not monetizing it. So there's no ulterior motive here. This is what speed work is. So I'm a marathoner. I run Sundays for 2 to 3 hours. And in 2 hours, maybe I'll run 12, 13 miles, and 3 hours take me about 18 to 20 miles, and that's pretty slow. And those runs help with my endurance, so that at the end of the GRE, at the end of my run, I don't necessarily go any slower. I don't fatigue because I have these long runs. But it doesn't help my speed. What helps your speed and what helps you have more time for other questions is something called speed work. So 400 meter, 800 meter, and because it's marathon, half marathon, even 1 mile runs, run them at a higher speed than I would during the race. And it mixes up the training. Racing is fun and it helps create gains in overall speed. So our goal here is to learn vocabulary, to increase our speed in sections, to give us more time on more difficult questions. So scores and percentages, these are the concordance tables as of June 30th, 2015, I think is what I saw on there. So verbal reasoning, 1,694,715 people took it, and I'm just going to round this to approximate it to 1,700,000. So if you are in the top 1%, if you are, are the 99th percentile, then you're in company of about 17,000 people. If you're 1% below that, you're in company of 34,000, and if you're 10% below that, you're in 170,000. So if you're thinking about the number of people that take the GRE in this time, and you're competing against X number of applicants, well, these scores, this 98% doesn't seem to be that impressive when you look at the top 34,000 and say, oh wow, there's 34,000 other people that could be applying to these programs. So we really want to get the highest score that we can, because you think, oh, 88th percentile, that seems pretty good. But you're in a company of 170,000 people. So again, we want to try to get the best score that we can. And I think that I've got 3 methods or 3 points that I want to cover in this video. The first one is how to speed up your vocabulary. That's what we want to do. And I'm going to talk about the test strategy to improve speed. Just overall test strategy. I'll briefly go over this. But first, you want to go through the text completion and sentence equivalence. You want to do those first. And what you may or may not know about the test is that you can come back to questions. So you go through, and if it's a text completion or sentence equivalence, you take that question, you do it right now. If you have a short passage, you just pick C and keep moving on until you hit a text completion sentence equivalence. Same thing with the reading comprehension long passage. Just pick C until you get to text completion sentence equivalent. You'll come back to short passages, and then you'll finally do the long passage. I'll talk more about that. Resources to use and not use. So the GRE vocabulary top 52, I said videos, but I really meant words. Somebody took this right from the Kaplan book, and I think it's got like 1 million, 2 million views. And I'll talk about why this is maybe not the best method to prepare. And then why this method does not work. I'll talk about how I did memorize the top 300 and only one of them showed up on the actual exam. And that would be very disappointing return on an investment. But I'll talk about what you can do. And the most important thing is to understand etymology and nuance, and I'll define those terms. And then the third thing is we're going to want to create an algorithm for improving your vocabulary. Every single day you want to improve your vocabulary, and this is how to do it. So we'll write down the word we don't know, we'll guess the meaning, and I'll tell you why that's important. We'll look up etymology on Google by literally putting etymology library in the search bar, and then we'll link to other words you know, and I'll talk about my Spanish-English background and how I link them and improve my vocabulary. Okay, so let's start with the test strategy to improve speed. First, the text completion sentence equivalents. These are very fast section. You can do these quickly. And what it is really something like a differential diagnosis, which is part of the medical profession. So you differentiate between two conditions with similar signs and symptoms. That symptom should be plural. And it's a very nuanced section, and it's very much easier for native speakers. And what that's really testing is, do you know the difference between words that really look just like each other? And as I go through the techniques, I'll talk about two words or two roots, one in library and one in equilibrium, and this LIBR is a nuance. That is, in library, it's talking about books. In equilibrium, it's talking about libra, or a scale and weighing something. And that nuance is it's the exact same letters, but nuanced meaning. And as you use this technique, or use the techniques in this video, you'll find that you're much better at catching nuances. And it's not uncommon to only know which choices are wrong. There were at least, I want to say, 2 questions where I had no idea what the 2 words meant, but I got them right when I went back after the test and looked them up. And I only knew that the other 4 were wrong. And that is a very tough way to take a test, but it's a very tough test. And if you continue to improve your vocabulary, you may get to the point where you say, okay, well, I know all these are wrong, so I don't know what the word means, but it has to be that word. It has to be that one because the other ones are wrong. Reading comprehension, short passages, pick C. So when I look at the short passages, the first thing you want to do, just pick C and move on, because you're going to come back to them. And you want to make sure that you get as many questions marked as you can. So if something happens, disaster strikes, you get to the end and you actually ran out of time only doing text completion sentence equivalents, at least you have put an answer for these. I don't think that's going to happen, but this is how I went through it. So I actually went through it 3 times. First I did text completion sentence equivalent very quickly. Then I went through the short passages, and then I did the long passage. Someone asked me about reading comprehension, and I think it's easier, especially if you are somebody whose major will require a high math score and you don't even know why this English part is on there, but you still want to look good. You don't want to get a bottom percent, and if you have 2 applicants both with 99 in math, and that's not uncommon for engineering programs to get that, and you see one student has maybe a 10 on the verbal and another has 50, then it's very easy to say, okay, well, we'll take the one that has 50. I would personally look at these reading comprehension short passages as the computer logic if-then statements. Aristotelian logic is actually very helpful. If this is true, then go do this. If this is not true, then go do that, or don't do that. And if you look at the question as, okay, here's this thesis statement. If this thesis statement is true, then what's true after that? And you're going to find that if you look at these questions that way, it makes a lot more logical sense. At least to me, it did. Use these sections to improve the vocabulary through narrative. So as you're taking these practice exams, you want to write down which words you didn't know, and you're going to want to take a guess. And I'll talk a little bit about that as a method of improving your vocabulary. If you have missing vocabulary, if there are words in there that you don't know, it may make the passage incomprehensible. That word may be the link, and the GRE test makers know this. They put the word in there to test you, and really it becomes a vocabulary question. If you knew that word, you would know what the passage means, and you would know how to get it right. This is why vocabulary is so important. And then third, reading comprehension for the long passage. Again, pick C, just go through all of them. And then slowest of all the passages, I saved it for last. I knew exactly how much time I had to work with this last passage, and that was a real advantage to know, okay, well, this is how fast I have to get through it. It's the best section to time and practice to see improvement. So how many words per minute are you reading at? And you'll see that as you get better at the vocabulary, your words per minute is going to pick up. And then you need the highest vocabulary to succeed here, just because of the body of words. You're talking about very nuanced passages, if-then statements, evidence, and a lot of different things come together. But the higher the vocabulary, the easier these longer passages are going to be for you. So the resources to use and not use. There's GRE vocabulary top 52 word videos, and that's taken directly from Kaplan. Like somebody stole the words from Kaplan, but I don't know if you can copyright a list of words. And the thing I don't think people think about is the GRE makers see these videos too, and they say, oh, okay, well, here's 2 million people looking at this video, and here are the 52 words. Well, they can look at it and go, okay, well, let's just take those words off, right? And you say, well, how could there be enough words to use on the GRE if they don't use those 52? Well, there are millions of words in the English language and keep adding, so there's plenty of words. I assure you of that. Matching the word on the left to 5 on the right, which is how many of these Quizlet note cards and videos say, okay, well, here's a word and then here's 5 to 10 synonyms. That's not how we remember things. After you do the first word, do you remember what you just looked at? And the answer is probably no. How do we learn? We learn from narrative, and we learn from mistakes. We do not learn from word lists, unless we've made the word lists ourselves and we have some kind of investment in them. But narrative and mistakes. Okay, so we learn from stories and we learn from mistakes because, oh, I didn't get that. I thought it was this and it wasn't. So now I remember it. Okay? So why the method doesn't work? Well, I'm telling you, I took the GRE and I memorized all top 300 words from one of the premier lists, and only one word was word for word in there. That means that if you're depending on those top lists, it's just not going to be there. There's a much better way to do it. And what is likely to happen is that the word parts from that top 300 list will be there. So if advocate and equivocate are on there, you see the VOC, and the VOC is like the VOC from vocal. It's to talk. So someone who is an advocate talks for you. Okay, so ad is a positive connotation from Latin. It means to, towards. But so someone who is going to speak on your behalf versus equivocate. So EQUI means it's about equivalent, but in this case it means you're going back and forth about equally to both sides. So equivocate, advocate, you may not know exactly what it means, but you see the voc in there and oh, it's speaking to something. So again, learn from narrative, learn from mistakes, not from the word lists. Okay, so understanding etymology and nuance, this is the key to this slide. Etymology is the origin of the word. It's the word's story. Okay, so you're going to remember a word if you learned where it came from. If you learned, oh, that's interesting, I didn't know that it came from Latin, or it came from France, or oh, I see that, yeah, it has that kind of feel where it's a Latin word or a French word or something like that. And here's where the nuance comes in. If somebody says, I'm an advocate, and that's, now I'm using it as a noun, not as a verb. So an advocate, well, I'm just somebody's friend, okay? Or I'm just helping them out. But if you are a crusader, you'll see that as a synonym for advocate. But a crusader is a zealot. A crusader would die for you. So these are different nuances to the same meaning. An advocate and crusader will be synonyms, but one is more of a friend, and one, which is, you know, on the different spectrum than a zealot who is just crazy about things. Okay? So what you want to do is you want to train to break words apart. Advocate. Okay, we're not talking about syllables and necessarily in pronunciation, but we're saying that ad means to towards something positive. Voc means to talk about. And then ate, that's not the word ate like I had something to eat. Rather, it's just a part of it that isn't really going to be as important for us in meaning. Where equivocate, the EQUI is like the part of equal, and then the voc again is to talk. So you start to break these words apart, and that's what you want to do, is that every time you see a word, it should immediately separate for you as you get better at doing this vocabulary. Okay. So part 3, what's the algorithm? How do I improve my vocabulary every day so that each day I'm getting better and better? So the first thing you want to do is that I recommend that Kaplan test prep book, the one with the 6 online tests. It's only like 25 or 30 bucks. That's all I used for my preparation to get 98% on GRE. So write down the word you don't know and guess the meaning. Okay. It's okay to make mistakes, and it's mistakes that help you learn. If you don't make the mistakes and you just get them all right on the practice test, you're not going to improve. You want these mistakes. These mistakes are gold when it comes to learning. You want to build your own word list, your own note cards, your own flashcards, so that instead of 300 words that may or may not be on the test that you have to muscle to learn them, well, you find 300 words that you didn't know before, and now you do. And you'll start seeing that there are patterns in those words, and then you'll be able to sort them. And then you'll have these really deep connections where getting a word list from someone else is a superficial one. I will warn you, this will feel very slow at first. It's very tough to say, oh my gosh, I've got GRE in X number of months, and look how slow I'm going. It took me hours to get through these couple of paragraphs. It's slow at first. It really is. But it's better in practice than on the test. And I assure you that as you continue to do this every day, you will get much, much better. Second, look up the etymology on Google by putting in literally the word etymology and then the word you want. So the word we'll use is library. So the origin you'll find is that it's from the Latin liber, or book. And I would immediately take that to Spanish, and I'll talk about that in part 3 here. But you know, the word libro is book in Spanish. And then the nuance is that libra is scale. And so we look at the word part and say, oh, I got it down. LIBR, that's a word part. It means book. So a library is a place where they have books. Libretto is something where you have just a little book. So the etto makes it a small book. But then you see the word part in equilibrium, in uncalibrated. But this isn't book. This is scale or balance. And equilibrium is having good balance. You know, uncalibrated is something that is not balanced. That nuance between the LIBR in library, libretto, and equilibrium in uncalibrated, that's when you know you're doing really well. But this comes from practice. This comes from seeing these words in narrative, in your practice exams, and that's how you get good at it. So you want to link this word to the others you know, whether it's on your note card or on your list. So I speak Spanish, so library has libros, or books. And LIBR is in both library and libros, and that helps me put it together. But if I say the same sentence in Spanish, la biblioteca tiene books, la biblioteca tiene libros, that means that the library has books, and then biblioteca begins with B, and books begins with B. So I'm making these connections between the words that I know. So libretto, bibliography, bibliophile. Libretto, I might not have known what that word meant ahead of time, but I got a feel for that. It's like a little book or something. Bibliography, I see the biblio from library or book, and I see graph to write, so writing something about the book. And you know from your classes, APA style, MLA style, that a bibliography is a list of books that you're referencing. And the bibliophile, so philosophy is love of learning, so phile is love of something, so bibliophile, someone who loves books. And so it's a very organic way, a very fun way, I think, to learn vocabulary, rather than here's a word list, I have to memorize this word list, and then you find on GRE day that, wow, not one of those words was on the word list, or maybe one or two, and that you really didn't get the return on investment. So let me give you some take-home points. Speed in vocabulary learning comes from slowing down to get to the word, know the words technically by their etymology, but also by their feeling and nuance. So the etymology of library versus libretto versus the equilibrium and recalibrate, those are nuance. So etymology is where you start, and then as you get better at this, you're going to get good at these feelings and getting the nuance from them. You can see the improvement when your predictions increase in accuracy. So keep your old notes and see how, oh my gosh, I remember how much I was struggling with these words, and now look how fast I make it through, especially the long reading comprehension, or even some of the short ones. But if you keep your old notes, you'll see that how many words did you have to circle that you didn't know before, and now you're finding that, no, I may not have learned the word directly, but I'd gotten so many word parts down that now I'm seeing the word. And then once vocabulary goes from muscling it like Sisyphus with his boulder up the hill. So Sisyphus was this guy that was punished by the gods and had to keep pushing this boulder up the hill, then back down, boulder up the hill. And as you're trying to learn vocabulary from word lists, what you'll find is that maybe you learn 5 words, and then you learn the next 5 words, and you forgot the first 5. And that's because it didn't happen organically. It didn't happen through narrative. And so once you go from that, trying to muscle it and learn as many words as you can, books will say that, oh, learn 100 words, 300 words, 3,000 words. That's not how you do it. And it's not fun. It's not enjoyable. You want to have a genuine curiosity for, where did this word come from? It's really nice to meet you, and I treat words like people, really. Well, more like coffees. Hey, where are you from? Oh, you're pretty cool. And once you get that curiosity and genuine interest, you're going to have a confidence and enjoy the process. You're going to actually enjoy taking practice exams, and you will score better. Because instead of going in there and going, oh my gosh, I hope they don't give me words I don't know, you're saying, oh, look at this new word. I see that it resembles such and such, has a bit of an accent like this. I'm going to say it's probably meaning this. And it becomes a lot more fun. So instead of going into the GRE with fear, you go into the GRE with confidence. Well, I hope this speed work video was helpful. Again, if you want to, please subscribe. And if you have any questions, I do respond to comments relatively quickly.